Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Keiko Yuriko, and I will be the MC for this event. First of all, let us say our praise for this wonderful opportunity that we all have today. The honorable speaker, Mr. Joseph Lemun, Mr. Jonathan Moore, Mrs. Teresia Annie Anggreni, ME, PhD, and Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SE, SPD, MPD. The Honorable Vice Rector for Cooperation and Institution Development Affairs, Dr. Ellen Puspitasari, MSI, the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Language and Cultural Studies, Mrs. Endang Yuliani Rahayu, SSMPD. The Honorable the Head of the English Literature Study Program, Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SE, SPD, MPD. The Honorable Lecturer, fellow students, all participants, and presenter, welcome to International Students Conference on Linguistics and Literature 2021. This conference is proudly presented by the Faculty of Language and Cultural Studies of Universitas Unisbank Semarang. This year's conference takes a very interesting theme, digital transformation in linguistics and literature. Before we start, allow me to read the agenda of our event today. First is the opening, the prayer and singing our national anthem. Next, we will have the welcome address from the Vice Rector for Cooperation and Institution Development Affairs. After that, we have the opening address from the Dean of EBIB. We will continue our agenda with the plenary session with our 4 keynote speakers. And we will proceed to the question and answer session. We will have a break for an hour. Then we will move to the parallel session where the presenter and all participants will be assigned in breakout rooms. Before the closing, there will be a very important announcement in which we will mention the best speaker and best papers. Ladies and gentlemen, before moving on further, let us all pray together. Pray, start. Finish. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will sing our national anthem together. Thank you. And now the following is the welcome address from the Vice Rector for Cooperation and Institution Development Affairs for Dr. Ellen Puspitasari. The time is yours.
Thank you, Keiko Yuriko. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me in this opportunity to welcome all of these conference participants by praying again our grateful and praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala Almighty for the abundance of grace and mercies that have made us possible together here in this virtual media in excellent condition and health. Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the respected lecturers and the incredible students, all participants, and a very special welcome to our speakers, Mr. Joseph Lemon, filmmaker, audiovisual specialist, and project manager, and
itu ding
from Universitas
ya.
Satya Wacana Salatiga, Mrs. Teresia Eni Anggreni, MA PhD from Universitas Sanata Dharma Yogyakarta, and Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SE SPD MPD, who is head of English Literature Department, Universitas Unisbank Semarang. It is indeed a great honor and a pleasure to welcome you all to the International Student Conference on Linguistics and Literature, organized by English Literature Department, FPIP, Fakultas of Language and Culture, Universitas Unisbank Semarang. I would like to thank Mrs. Endang Yuliani Rahayu SS MPD as a Dean of FPIP, and also Head of English Literature Department, Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, and Dr. Sugeng Purwanto MA as a Chairperson of the International Student Conference on Linguistics and Literature 2021. And I also gratefully thank to all members of FPIP and sponsor that contribute to this conference. And I represent today of the Unisbank Rectorate fully support to this conference program. The student conference is a scientific work discussion forum, which is expected to become a routine activity to increase the creativity of students and lecturers in dealing with the development of science, especially in the study of English literature and linguistics. I think digital transformation in linguistics and literature is very interesting term. It is mutually agreed that language and literature learning process a strategic role in producing student accomplishment in reading habits, which become the basis for them learn other subjects. Through language and literature learning, students' competencies are built in their reading, writing, speaking, listening, and viewing. And then the advance of technology have allowed digital transformation to reach all productive sectors, including the education sector and its members. And we know this transformation is linked to emerging technology. The digitalization of process and resources and the demand for users to upgrade to the latest technology updates. However, digital transformation goes beyond just the use of technology. It must consider changes in talent, culture, and organizational structure. Even the education sector has not been left out of this transformation. University have embedded of the road to digital transformation and have incorporated technology in our education, administrative, communication, and learning process. Advanced such as education technology platform and electronic communication such as email, social media messaging, and we know YouTube are used regularly in the university. Both teachers and students have access to this technology and digital resources, which has been a catalyst for university to reassess their traditional education model. Moreover, to drive and ensure the university's digital transformation, it is necessary to develop both the teachers and students' skill to adapt and use advanced technology. Technological changes have caused users to learn and unlearn, develop new competency, be spectators, and even contribute content. User of technology must acquire the knowledge and skills to use it effectively for their learning. One of the challenges is that user must dedicate time to develop new skills to operate and apply the technology. We know the classroom digital transformation goes beyond the use of tools and software. It impacts the knowledge and skill of its users, teachers, students, and didactics and process of education institution. Example of using education technology can be found in digital pedagogies. Mrs. Anula is an expert in that area. Technology models and adaptive, open, smart, and disruptive technology also. Member of educational institution must be attentive and prepare to keep abreast of the changes brought about by digital transformation. As technology continually evolves, the new skills will not remain static, but will continuously change. The challenge remains for institutions and individuals to identify, adapt, and adopt the advance to their contextual needs. I'm sorry, I have a long speech, Keiko. I think I have taken a session from speakers. Well, Mrs. Endang, I wish the conference a complete success to all of our distinguished guests, speakers, and participants. Thank you for being here. Welcome and enjoying the conference. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Ms. Memelan. And then the following is the opening address from the Rahayu SSMBD. The time is yours.
Yeah, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Vice Rector in Cooperation and Institution Development Unisbank Affairs, Ibu Ellen, Dr. Ellen Puspita, MSc, the Honorable Mr. Jonathan Moore as the keynote speaker, a international lecturer from UKSW Salatiga, the Honorable Mr. Joseph Lemon, PhD, as the second speaker, an Australian filmmaker, audiovisual specialist, and project manager, the Honorable Mrs. Teresia Eni Anggraini, MA, PhD, as the third speaker from Unsadar, Yogyakarta. Also, the Honorable Dr. Agnes Widianingrum, PhD, MPD from Unisbank, the Honorable, the Chairman of this committee, Dr. Sugeng Purwanto, MA, also the Honorable on the committee from the lecturers and the students, as well as all the participants. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin. Praise to Allah, who always give us blessing in every single of our moments, yeah, with a lot of abundance, yeah. I'm happy today that finally we can create this kind of student conference. Yeah, I would like to thanks to some people who have been involved in this students conference, to the Vice Rector in Cooperation and Institution Development Affairs, thank you very much for all your support and attention always to our faculty, and we always work together hand in hand, finishing our many projects in this year. And then to the committee, thank you very much for all your hard work that you have devoted in this time, that we have been able to make this third student conference. Yeah, especially to Mr. Lilit Supriyatmaji as the moderator this morning, and then Dr. Katarina Rustipa, MBD, and Ibu Yulistianti, SSM Hum, as the reviewers for all the article today's, and also Mr. Teguh Prabowo, MBD, with his great IT knowledge to handle this conference, and our support from Dr. Agnes Widianirum, who always gives committee who involved in this students conference. To the presenters, thank you very much that you are willing to share your great knowledge, research experience, and insightful presentation to us, to our students, and all participants of this students conference. And then to the student presenters, thank you very much for your on research and as a practice to share your idea in international conference session. Yeah. And then to the participants, mainly the students, yes, thank you very much today for your attention, for your attendance. Yeah, that you have joined to this students conference, and you can use this as your practice for your extensive listening and enrich your knowledge in linguistics, culture, and literatures. So to announce that this morning, yeah, we have also participants from another city, even another country. There are some participants from Yogyakarta, Bengkulu, and Taiwan. He or she is from Guangzhou University. Yeah, alhamdulillah for this one. The third one. So we want to make it this really different from, and even former. So we try to make it better. That's like a blessing. We could meet special speakers today. Thank you very much for the speakers. Yeah. Okay. Well, as you know, all we have been experiencing pandemic for more than 20 months. Yeah, many things have changed, and some of our lives have also been changed. Yeah, and we are not allowed, yeah, to meet the student directly, to teach the student in the class, and maybe the student, and of course the student could not find the lecturer or the teachers in the class too. Formerly, at first it was a big problem, but now we have been accustomed. We have been adapted with new situation, with the new normal of life. Yeah, so we have to be able to always to devote our time to make our life become more creative, to realize every day. Yeah, even though we all know that the last July was the the worst situation where a lot of people suffered from COVID, even a lot of people died for this in this pandemic. So we must programs, activities which is more challenge, yeah, to make it, yeah, we must be able to adapt to this situation. Okay, I would like also to share that although we are in this kind of situation, FBIB and also the Department of English Department, we have been able to adapt to the situation, and we joined to some program established by students. That is, some of students join to the student exchange, yeah, nationally, and then some of them also join in another program like teaching assistant to some elementary schools, Compass Gramedia. Hope that's really a hope proof that although in a pandemic situation, we still make our students are still making achievement, yeah, to continue our activities. Yeah, hope they can make more and more achievement to for the followings. Yeah. Also, yeah, the international students, the international students conference today is also one day the students will be motivated to continue their study, or work, or live in another country in a broader environment, because in last period, our students also joined to some short courses in China. Hope the fellow will continue this achievement, yeah, later on after the pandemic over, yeah, to make sure that the life is safe, yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully from this students conference you be familiar with the digital transformation to support our life, because everybody now is depend on the IT quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, so this is the time for me to open this conference by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, the International Conference on Linguistics and Literature 2021 with the theme Digital Transformation and Linguistics and Literature is officially open. Hopefully, this conference will bridge the set in this kind of conference in different time and space, yeah, with various themes, and hope the students will always have a habit in reading and critical thinking in their everyday life to support their study. That's all my speech. Good luck for this conference. Hope everything will run very well. Thank you very much. Good morning. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ma'am Endang. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we moving on to the next agenda, let's we all take a picture together. So, ladies and gentlemen, please turn on your camera and we will take a picture together. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Once again, smile.
Wait, on my cue.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, be ready. 1, 2, 3. Next page. Video on, please. 1, 2, 3. Next page. Next page. Okay, back to the previous page. Once again. 1, 2, 3. Sweet. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I guess this is what we are waiting for, the plenary session. I believe that we will learn a great deal from our speakers today. The moderator of the plenary session will be the Honorable Dr. Andes Lili Supriyatmaji, MPD. For Mr. Lili Supriyatmaji, please kindly take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Keiko. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are now with me, Lili Supriyatmaji, the moderator of the plenary session of this International Student Conference held virtually by the Faculty of Language and Cultural Studies, Unisbank University Semarang. We are very grateful to invite four experienced keynote speakers in this conference: Mr. Jonathan Moore, Mr. Joseph Lemun, PhD, Mrs. Teresia Eni Anggraini, MA, PhD, and Mrs. Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SE, and SPD and PD. Please allow me to read the profile of each keynote speaker. Let me start with Mr. Jonathan Moore. Currently, Mr. Jonathan Moore is an international instructor of English literature and culture at Satyawacana Christian University. He was also an instructor at Sugiyo Pranoto Catholic University, Diponegoro University, University of Asmat North East Africa, Baker College, Illinois, Heartland Community College, Illinois. He was educated in Illinois and got a Master of Arts in English with an emphasis in literature, of course. Manuscript presentation, writing awards in different occasions, and was granted with different university scholarships and honors. One thing that you have to remember that he speaks English, Bahasa Indonesia, the Tigrinya language of Northeast Africa. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Now, the next keynote speaker would be Mr. Joseph Lemun. Currently, Mr. Joseph Lemun is an Australian filmmaker, audiovisual specialist and project manager who is currently working on video advocacy projects in the development sector in Nusa Tenggara, Indonesia. He was educated in Japan for his scholarship in postgraduate research into audio visual technology, especially at the Tokyo University of the Arts, and Bachelor of Arts majoring in audiovisual technology at University of Western Sydney. And he has a lot of experience as a project coordinator and publication and communication officer of Voice Oxfam and of Folk Foundation, Sipta Media, and producer of Van Foden Sweden and of Production Vice Japan. And another thing that is he speaks English as his native language and proficient Japanese and proficient Bahasa Indonesia, and of course, Sumbanish, and he is also skillful in computer in many different softwares, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, the next keynote speaker would be with Ibu Teresia Eni Anggraini, MA, PhD. She got her PhD in literature for children and young from the Ohio State University, and MA in education majoring in language arts from the Ohio State University, and Bachelor of Arts in English from Gajah Mada University. Her works experience, well, you know that she is the she was the postdoctoral researcher at the Ohio State University and graduate research associate at the US or Indonesia Teaching Education Consortium, Ohio State University. And currently, she is a lecturer at Sanata Dharma University, Vice Dean at the Faculty of Letters, and Editor-in-Chief of Phenomena Journal of Language and Literature, Sanata Dharma University. Well, she is, become invited speaker in different topics and joined conference presentation in different topics also, and a lot of publication, grants, scholarships, and professional membership belongs to her qualification. Now, the last or the fourth keynote speaker would be with Ibu Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SEM, SPD, MPD. She is now currently the Kaprodi Program of English Literature, FBEB Unisbank. She is a senior lecturer at English Literature and Language and Cultural Studies of Unisbank University. She got her doctor in English language learning from Semarang State University, master in English language learning, also from Semarang State University, sarjana degree in English language learning from Semarang State University, and also a sarjana degree in economics from Parahyangan University. Well, she also wrote many articles in different topics in international journals and also in different topics in national journals. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have read the profiles of the four our experienced keynote speakers. Now we have to come to the first speaker. This would be dedicated to Mr. Jonathan Moore with the theme, The Digital Wood Between the World, Accessing the Infinity of World Literature. Please, Mr. Jonathan Moore, deliver your material. I have to say sorry, in only 20 minutes, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Thank you. I think it is now your time to present your material. Thank you.
All right, just give me 1 second and I should be able to turn on the shared screen. You can get that to me. That's the first one. I'm always having to figure out the technology.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'm hoping that you guys can see my screen. Please interrupt if you can't. Let me go ahead and get us back to where we belong. All right, and feel free to interrupt because I'm not seeing you on my screen right now, but in the next 20 minutes, what I want to go ahead and talk to you about, and fair warning, I have a tendency to do it quickly. I'm the son of a lawyer and the brother of a lawyer, and the rule in my family is that if you don't talk quickly, you don't get heard. But what I want to talk to you about, even though we're focused on this idea of the digital community and digital transformation, right now, more than any other time in the world, we have access to an almost unlimited supply of fiction. And as literature readers and as English speakers, the problem for many of us isn't in the fact that we don't have access to these things, but we don't know where to start. I started my overseas teaching career working in North Africa, and virtually any time that somebody had access to an English book, I would gravitate towards it, because there were so few in the little country of Eritrea. Even 15 years ago, when coming to Indonesia, the accessibility to world literatures outside of either Indonesian literature or the canon of British or American literature was almost inaccessible. I found myself sneaking into the Paraplus bookstore in Semarang's airport on the weekends just to be able to get my hands on something in English. But right now, we don't have that problem as much, as the digital transformation has allowed us to access these things through virtually any number of devices that we got. Many of you are familiar with C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia stories. Many of you have probably read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or seen it on film. You've watched Prince Caspian or Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Some of you may not be as familiar where I get this graphic from, which is The Magician's Nephew. Now, in The Magician's Nephew, two children find themselves in a place that's referred to as the wood between worlds. And those pools that they find within this quiet, idyllic setting allow them access to any number of worlds. This is where we're at right now. There are so many books right now that we've got access to. Something like 129 million plus books are in the world as of 2008. According to UNESCO, we've got more than 1.8 million books being published already this year, and that number continues to increase. In 2015, Google tried to estimate how many English books there actually were, and they came up with a number of 2,714,409. That was their best estimate of what they were able to come up with, and roughly 221,000 of those were fiction. This is according to the Stanford Literary Lab. Even if only 50% of those, 51, 52% of those is coming out of the United States, that leaves over 48% of the books being published in English that are fiction from outside of the United States. And the problem is that we got so many different world literatures to choose from. As a post-colonialist who studies literature outside of the United States, we run into this challenge of the fact that there are so many more world literatures. And those world literatures, when we talk about this term, can be defined as by their global region. So we could refer to it as something like Southeast Asia. We could talk to you about specific countries. So instead of just focusing on the region, we can narrow it down. But even if we talk about something like Indonesian literature, what does that ultimately mean? There's such a huge variety of Indonesian literature. If you're reading Indonesian literature from Aceh, you're going to find that that's very different than Indonesian literature translated to English coming out of places like Bali. We can look at individual language groups. Sometimes those language groups transcend nations or even ethnic groups. We can talk about the subject material. Is African literature anything written about Africa? Or is African fiction something more specific than that? And then finally, we can talk about the author's origin or country of residence. I have a young man, I have a son who just turned 17 yesterday. Is he as a birth American, or is he Indonesian because he spent most of his life in this country? And so if we're beginning to go ahead and decide, where do we start with literature? When we're trying to figure out, I want to read something beyond what I've been taught in schools or beyond the traditional Western canon. So we need to go ahead and think about this first. When I was living in Eritrea, they used to have a joke. Was the term copyright or copyright? And so I always stress this to my students, even before we get into this deep conversation, that a text found online is not necessarily there legally. And so you need to be careful about this. As literature people, as English majors, English is our currency and language is important. That if you're taking things from the internet illegally, you're really stealing a person's work and livelihood. So the text and any profit that comes from it still ultimately should belong to the copyright holder, even if you find it online. Usually this means the author. The Berne Convention in 1948, I believe, is when it was established, most recently. It establishes the protection for the literary and artistic works. And so just so you know, so you've got a starting place, if you're thinking about using material that you find online for an entire class, or if you want to go ahead and print it off and give it to your friends, the copyright remains active for the life of the author for at least 50 years beyond that. In countries such as Indonesia and the United States, is actually 70 years. So this gives you an idea about just because it's online doesn't necessarily mean that it's legally yours to reproduce or to go ahead and use for your classes. So I just want to go ahead and make sure that that's clear. Even though this conference is focused on the digital, I want to go back old school. What you got on your screen right now is actually a picture of my bookshelf. The Wizard of the Crow is sitting there right in the middle. And I want to encourage you that if you think that you're interested in digging into foreign literature, to world literatures, and you don't know where to start, go to any bookstore. And so if you're in Semarang, my fallback bookstore is Book Boss down there on Jalan Dorang by the old train station and Pasar Johar. But go to that library, to that bookshelf that you find, to the one in your professor's office space. And I want you to go ahead and just pull the first international book that you see that might be of interest to you off the shelf. Doesn't mean that that's going to be the one that you read. Wizard of the Crow is a couple hundred pages long, and my 10-year-old daughter was looking at it today with kind of awe about how long, how big it is, and it may be a little too intimidating. But what you don't have to do is to start with just that book. Once you found the international literature section in the bookstore or on the bookshelf, start looking and seeing what its neighbors are. Start looking at the other authors that you're seeing nearby. If you're seeing Ngugi, you're likely to see somebody like Achebe or somebody like Soyinka. My bookshelf has people like Pramudia Nandataur, as well as certain Indian writers. And go through and look to see what the neighbors are. Go old school and investigate not just the back cover to see what you can find about what people are saying about this author, but to see what the other authors are mentioning. Who is recommending this book? And maybe you need to go to them. I want you to go ahead and open up the book. Look to see what you can find about the author section. One of the reasons that I focused on Ngugi is because Ngugi was taught by another famous African author by the name of Chinua Achebe. Knowing that means that we can go ahead and look to see where else should we go ahead and examine. So if you like Ngugi, you may want to go back to Achebe. You may want to find other Achebe students that have gone ahead and learned from Achebe. The About the Author section will give you an idea about who the author studied under, where the author studied, what kind of schooling he or she had, and you can get deep into that. And then finally, I don't want you to disregard the publisher's notes. Oftentimes you'll find a lot of additional material stuck in there that quite honestly is self-serving for the publisher. But sometimes those will give you a good list of the other books published by Heinemann or by the Penguin African Classics that you can find. Find out who else the publisher is recommending and what else they're doing in terms of publishing. Maybe you're not interested in somebody like Ngugi or Achebe because you want to find a more contemporary or female author. And they'll list out some of their other clients that they've been publishing as well. So that's one place to go ahead and begin to start if you're thinking about delving into world literatures. If you want to go ahead and find something that your teachers aren't teaching in the classroom, start there. But most of us are pretty digitally savvy. If you guys are among the digital natives in which you grew up with a hand phone in your hand, there's another place for you to start. And I would encourage you to go ahead and start learning from the lists. If you really want to find the best, if you want to find the most critically acclaimed books, start looking at the lists. On the left-hand section there, I've got a list of some of them. By no means is this comprehensive. Look at the Nobel Prize in Literature. It's often been viewed as snooty. There are politics behind it, but the Nobel Prize in Literature is a great place to go ahead and start to find the great works. And granted, I want to make it clear that the Nobel Prize is heavily slanted towards Western literature, to what we refer to as dead white men in a lot of cases. But throughout the last decade, or even a little bit longer than that, they've begun to diversify, in which we're looking at more global authors. As Ngugi would say, we're moving the center of what is good literature and the literary canon. I would encourage you to look at the Newstead International Prize for Literature. It comes out every 2 years. And don't just look at the winner, but look at the lists. Look at the people who have been nominated for it or who have been shortlisted for it. The International Botev Prize, which is out of Eastern Europe, is a good place to start if that's an area that you're interested in. The Commonwealth Short Story Prize, and there are several different Commonwealth prizes out there. If you're looking for the colonies, the British Empire does a pretty good job of promoting their literature from around the world. And so the Commonwealth Short Story Prize is a great place to start. Start delving into who made those lists. And the other reason I would encourage you to look at the Commonwealth Short Story Prize is because you may not be ready to commit to 200 or 300 pages of literature, but you might be willing to go ahead and try 20 or 30 pages. And that'll give you a taste for the literature coming out of those regions or by those authors. The Kane Prize for African Literature is another good one to look at. Again, I'm focusing here primarily on African literature because that's what I know best. The Wole Soyinka Prize, I think, is the newest one on this list. And Wole Soyinka is one of the great African writers, along with Chinua Achebe and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And this prize in literature in Africa is focused a little bit more narrowly than some of the ones that you got. I would encourage you to go deeper than that. Look for the prize by nation, by the region, by the ethnic group. Oftentimes there are much smaller, less noticeable, less publicized prizes given out on those smaller levels. And start digging into those things. So if you're interested just in Papuan literature, look to see if there are prizes given out by Indonesian groups or by international groups that focus in on that region alone. If you want to go ahead and focus on Malay literature, look to see what's out there being promoted by the government as well as by NGOs within those regions. So there's a lot of places that you can start digging. Another place for you to look at that may be viewed as a little more superficial, but it's certainly valuable to dig into, is to simply type into Google the best African writers, the best Indonesian writers, the best African science fiction writers, and you'll probably come up with several lists. Look at the most important African literary works, the most important Southeast Asian literary works, and try typing those things in. Just fill in the blank with the area that you're most interested in. The best-selling, again, books by region. Look at the list and see what people are reading. Those may be more pop books or what I refer to as airline novels, and there's nothing wrong with that. Reading what the average reader in the region is looking at. Dig into those kind of things. It'll give you a pretty good start. And then finally, look at free books by typing in PDF afterwards as well. Be careful about the copyright infringement, but I would encourage you to go ahead and stick your head into those kind of lists as well. You've got access to all of this information. It's just a matter of digging into it. And then I also want to encourage you to listen to the literati. The literati are those people who make and influence literature today. Probably the most underrated source that I would use for literature, but also for ESL in general. If you're not listening to National Public Radio, npr.org, this is slow news published out of America. And I would encourage you to look through that, not only just for the literature, but also for the music, for the news, for the culture that's included there, because the speakers are typically a little bit slower and the news stories are a little less compressed from that source. But looking at npr.org, specifically at the books, every few days they're publishing new important interviews as well as news stories about what's being published out there. Some of those are going to be primarily in English for American readers, but they do diversify an awful lot. Google International Literature Podcasts and start looking there. You'll come up with quite a few of those things. And so when you're riding the bus, when you're kicking around in your coast and not doing anything of importance, try plugging into one of those podcasts and seeing what the people who read literature for a living, the people who live literature, because that's what they really enjoy. See what they're saying about literature. And so start Googling those kind of things. One of the things that you got the advantage of that I didn't have when I was your age, if you're a current college student, is the ability to actually interact with many of the authors that you're wanting to read. Use social media. And so look at world literature today. That's something that I follow just through Facebook. Short Story Day Africa, again, another Facebook group that you can dig into and see what they're saying. But then if you're more active on social media, why not follow the author directly? Why not look at the publishers and see what they're producing on their Instagram pages, for instance? Go to the festivals and look through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But the neat thing that you can do is you can actually interact with these people. And a lot of the times they'll respond, or their people will, their publicists will. And so if you've got a question for somebody like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who's one of the great contemporary African writers coming out there today, contact her directly and see if you can get some feedback on it. I encourage you to look at the literary festivals. Certainly the Bali Literary Festival is a great one to go to if you're interested in see what's being published out of Indonesia. And then the last one that I've got listed is through openculture.com. Unisbank and UGM and Sanata Dharma and UKSW, we've got good literature programs. But even with our electives, we can't cover every area that you might be interested in. And so I would encourage you to go to openculture.com and look at the online courses specifically written in literature and about culture that you can take for free. There are no exams, there's no required homework, there's nothing that you have to turn in. However, this is a good place for you to get into the depth of the study that it takes to really appreciate some of this literature, to see what the people are saying, to see what other colleges are teaching about this literature. So that's one of the things that I would encourage you to do, is to start digging into the media and social media that you already have access to. And then finally, joining the community. Literature is not just about reading books. And so, as I mentioned before, talking to the other readers, the teachers, and even the authors themselves through social media is one way to go ahead and begin to explore world literatures in a way that you might not have before. I know that there's always a concern about coming off as sombong, about sharing what you know and what you've been reading with others. And I encourage my students at UKSW to get past that idea. If you're excited about it, why not talk about it? Why not write and blog and participate, or even TikTok or Reel about what you're reading? So that when you get excited about a new book that you've just gone ahead and picked up, why not share that with others and encourage them to respond to you? That's how we grow as a literature community. I want you to just kind of dig into that. I want you to also encourage you to contribute to world literary conferences. Like this one or others, find student conferences that are talking about literature and join those things, or become a world literature writer yourself. October has a one novel program that comes out that encourages people to try to write their own book in the month of November, in the month of October. Try joining into that. I encourage you to go ahead and try digging into letting your voice be heard as an Indonesian writer. So in 20 minutes, I've tried to give you guys a really quick crash course in what do you end up, if you think you might be interested in study African, Asian, South American literature. I appreciate your time, and if you've got questions that we don't get to today, please contact me through jonathanmoore.uksw and reach me that way. And I think that that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave you. I appreciate this. Yeah, if you've got questions, by all means, go ahead and talk to me, and I'll get back to you. Not sure how to hand this back to you. All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Senator Moore. We will have the question and answer by the end of the presentation of all the keynote speakers. So we are sorry to say that one. We have to move to the second keynote speaker. Mr. Joseph Lamont, please, it's your time to deliver your materials about revitalizing the cultural assets of Sumba. Thank you. And again, similar to what has been done by Mr. Jonathan Moore, that you have to present, I'm sorry to say, in only 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Jonathan. Also, that was a very interesting talk. I'd also like to thank Ratang Wahangara from who actually introduced me to the committee today. He's a friend of mine in Sumba. So my topic today will be a little bit different from the theme of the conference, but I'm just going to talk about a project that I've been involved in East Sumba, in East Nusa Tenggara. So my name's Joseph. I'm an Australian filmmaker, an audiovisual specialist, and a project manager. And I'm currently working on video advocacy projects in the development sector. I've worked mainly in the film and television and music industry in Australia, Japan for 10 years, and now Indonesia. So currently, I'm employed as a specialist and communications manager in East Sumba. I've been based here since 2017 and involved with implementing 2 successive projects concerned with documenting and revitalizing traditional music and intangible culture in East Sumba. So this is a quick overview. I'd like to give a quick background on sustainable cultures, cultural heritage and why it's important. And then I'll move on to talk a little bit about a particular project that I've been involved in. And hopefully we can break up the presentation with a couple of videos that I've sent to the committee. There are 2 videos. I'm not sure if we can do that, but we'll see how it goes. And if there's any questions, fire away, or if there's a question session separately, that's fine too. So first of all, when we're talking about cultural heritage, what is cultural heritage? Well, UNESCO divides cultural heritage into 2 categories: tangible cultural heritage and intangible cultural heritage. So as a dictionary definition, tangible means perceptible by touch. So you can hold it in your hands. So intangible is not perceptible by touch. So tangible cultural heritage refers to physical artifacts produced, maintained, and transmitted intergenerationally in a society. So it would include physical artistic creations, built heritage such as buildings, monuments, and any other physical and tangible products of human creativity that create cultural significance in a society. So on the other hand, intangible cultural heritage is defined by UNESCO as the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith that communities, groups, and individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. So intangible cultural heritage includes things such as oral traditions and expressions such as language, poetry, storytelling. It encompasses all of the performing arts such as music, theater, dance, extending to social practices, rituals, festive events, traditional craftsmanship, traditional medicine, knowledge and practices about nature and the universe. So until recently, a lot more effort has been put into preserving tangible culture, but the foundation of tangible culture is actually the intangible knowledge that it arises from. So thinking a little bit about the effect of modernization on culture, both tangible and intangible, in these times, probably more than any other period in history, we have seen massive changes to our world. Economic and industrial development, urbanization, increased transmigration and tourism, the advance of technology and information networks have all led to massive socio-economic changes at the global and at the local level. Of course, there are many positive outcomes to this development, such as expanding our access to information and access to and appreciation of other values and cultures. But this rapid development has also brought many negative consequences. While the obvious negative consequences, such as climate change and damage to our biological ecosystems, this is what usually dominates the press, and for good reason. There is not really that much mentioned about the effect that the processes of modernization have on our cultural ecosystems, in particular those of Indigenous and minority peoples. One of the most culturally rich and diverse countries in the world. There are over 300 languages spoken, and the bulk of this diversity is contributed by these smaller minority Indigenous cultures. So while some cultural expressions of majority ethnicities in Indonesia, such as gamelan, are very well known worldwide and in no danger of disappearing, many smaller minority cultures have many forms of expression that have and are in danger of disappearing. Another stark example of loss of Indigenous culture is my country, Australia, where over 98% of all Indigenous performance traditions have been lost since colonization by the British. Thousands of Indigenous languages and all the knowledge contained within those languages have been lost forever. And this is a massive loss for the Aboriginal people, also for the humanity, a loss of humanity's pool of knowledge. It seems that the changes that are brought on by modernity tend to have a disproportionate effect on minority and Indigenous cultures. And many of these cultures worldwide are losing their heritage at an alarming rate. So what is the value of intangible cultural heritage? Intangible cultural heritage offers us a glimpse at the creativity of the human mind. It's a unique system, and it's the way that we understand the world. So the loss of intangible cultural heritage means a collective intellectual and creative loss for all of humanity. In the same way as loss of biodiversity, loss of cultural diversity has dramatic negative consequences for mankind. The richness of cultural resources available for us to learn from or enjoy diminishes every time that a cultural expression or cultural knowledge is lost. If we lose a species of plant or animal due to extinction, we lose all opportunities to learn from this life form, and the same applies to language and intangible culture. If a language is lost, all the ideas and ways of thinking about the world that are contained in that language are lost also. So cultural diversity is vital for maintaining a resilient cultural ecosystem that can adapt to the changes of the modern world. Loss of culture can have a domino effect and cause the loss of related knowledge also. For example, the loss of a musical genre or instrument can mean the loss of a language used within it, the loss of the poetry used within it, or the loss of an associated ritual or dance. Songs can also contain important information about culture, such as knowledge of clan genealogies, ancestral knowledge, mythologies, spiritual and philosophical knowledge also. Intangible cultural heritage also plays a very important role in building individual and collective identity within a culture, and it has the ability to promote cross-cultural understanding, exchange, and cooperation across cultures. Culture also has a key role in development. According to the 2020 British Council report, culture can contribute to the achievement of policy goals in areas such as economic development, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. Culture and international development have long been recognized as having a reciprocal and interdependent relationship that has evolved over the last 30 years. Even though the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals do not include culture as a standalone goal, the agenda includes several references to the importance of culture in relation to development. So culture is integrated in a cross-cutting manner across the various goals and targets. The Sustainable Development Goals, in the agenda, it states that we recognize all cultures and civilizations can contribute to and are crucial enablers of sustainable development. So we can see that the important role that culture, both tangible and intangible, should have in the future development of the world. Now I want to move on to sustaining and revitalizing culture. So in 2003, UNESCO published a convention titled UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. In the 18 years since this convention was published, it's clear that globalization has continued to challenge the vitality of cultural practices around the world. Modernity and technical innovation have undoubtedly improved health, education, productivity, and living standards. However, the vitality of traditional music and culture has in many cases drastically declined. The canon of many traditional music, oral cultures, is now only known by a handful of elderly members of communities, and much of this knowledge has not yet been adequately documented or transmitted to younger generations, putting these forms of culture in a very vulnerable position. According to the data collected by our project team between 2017 and 2020, many forms of East Sumbanese intangible cultural heritage are at risk of disappearing if revitalization does not occur before the oldest generation of culture bearers is gone. So a practical example of how modernity has influenced culture in Sumba are the songs that are traditionally performed in conjunction with the harvesting of rice. So with the introduction of mechanical harvesting and harvesting technology to Sumba, it meant that the manual work required in the past no longer exists, so that the songs and dances that actually accompany the harvest work are now rarely performed, and children are no longer learning these songs. In particular, there's one festival called Kandukuwaka, which has not yet been documented and has not been performed in Sumba for over 30 years. So that's a general background on intangible culture and why it's important. Now I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about the most recent project concerned with cultural sustainability that I've been involved with, which ran from October 2019 until March 2021. The project was titled Revitalizing Traditional Marapu Cultural Assets in East Sumba. And it was undertaken by a local NGO that I work with. My role in the project was as a project coordinator, and I was also involved in creating all the film and audio documentation undertaken during the program. So this program was focused on 3 villages in East Sumba. And in East Sumba, the indigenous people speak the Canberran language, which is spoken by around 250,000 people. The majority of 73% of East Sumbanese people have converted to Christianity, but many still follow the original indigenous religious system known as Marapu. However, the population of Marapu followers is in quite a drastic decline. Between 2013 and 2019, the population of Marapu followers dropped almost 50% due to religious conversion to Christianity. That's according to the data from the Central Bureau of Statistics in East Sumba. So our project was aimed at supporting East Sumbanese Marapu people and communities to document, archive, revitalize, disseminate, and celebrate their traditional music, song, and ritual practices. Maybe we can play a video at the end. Okay. So I'll give you a quick overview of the narrative of the project. So like I mentioned before, the first step in our program was to gather data on the vitality of music genres and different types of ritual in East Sumba. So we narrowed it down to 13 genres of traditional music and 5 different types of Marapu ritual in 3 locations that we would measure vitality. The survey that we employed was based on the Music Vitality and Endangerment Framework developed by one of the leading musicologists, Dr. Catherine Grant, at Griffith University in Queensland, Australia. So we surveyed the vitality of these different forms to determine which forms were most at risk, and we would use this information to inform and to prioritize our activities for the rest of the program. So following that initial assessment, the project team and our Marapu 87 performance and recording events across East Sumba, which enabled the project team to document and create an archive of 140 traditional songs performed by 70 different Marapu singers. A selection of these recordings were uploaded to a project YouTube channel, which has since received over 250,000 views and introduced the music recorded during the program to a very wide audience, including at the local level in East Sumba, throughout Indonesia, and at the international level also. All of the recordings made during this program were compiled onto 200 flash disk drives and distributed to various stakeholders throughout East Sumba, including performers and musicians, traditional Marapu leaders, local schools, regional and provincial governments, Sudanese cultural groups, and local civil society organizations. In addition to the documentation, we held a series of workshops which were facilitating transmission and sharing of intergenerational knowledge. Some of the activities included Marapu traditional musicians teaching children's folk songs to local children at schools, Marapu singing traditional instrument builders teaching their craft to younger instrument builders, and distributing 30 traditional music instruments to students. So drawing on all the documentation we created and government policy regarding preserving culture, the project team and the Marapu communities engaged in advocacy with the local governments in the areas we were working to allocate funding from the local government fund to cultural preservation, which resulted in securing funding in 3 locations for 2021. So in all three districts, the activities brought about social changes in terms of cultural vitality. In Kamangi, one of the areas we worked in, a key harvest festival that hadn't been performed in 5 years was undertaken along with the support of the program. That was a 3-day festival, and another ritual in order to secure steady rain for crops, which has not been performed in over 20 years, was undertaken on the 15th of June last year. Another 2 key harvest rituals were conducted in Hangaroro district that have not been performed in over 15 years. I might, if we can, I might take this opportunity, we don't have a lot of time left, to play one of the videos that made during the program. Is that possible?
I'm sorry, because you ran out of time. So
oh, we don't have time. Okay, maybe during the other sessions.
I guess we can play the videos.
Yeah, maybe in the other sessions, right?
Yes.
Okay,
so a separate session for thank you. Anyway,
okay, thank you very much.
Yes?
Yes. Okay, I'll wrap it up there then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Lemon. That's very good presentation. Anyway, we have to wait for a separate session for the question and answer. Maybe you can play your documentation, film, related to Sudanese culture. Thank you. Now, let's move to the next keynote speaker. This will be with Ibu Teresia Eni Anggraini, MA PhD, with Radical Change Books for the Digital Age. I think the time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Lili.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I would like to start by sharing. I hope I can share my desktop. Hold on. Right, is my PowerPoint visible?
Not yet.
Hold on. Can you see it now, Pak Lili?
Yes,
Yes.
that's good. Yes, thank you.
All right, so the topic for my presentation today is radical change books in the digital era. And this term I found from Eliza Dritzang's book 1999. And that was kind of the beginning of the worldwide internet access. I remember I was introduced to the internet around 1995, and actually handheld books, meaning physical books, are trying to catch up with the development of the internet. And the definition of radical change books itself was, and I quote from her book, books with fundamental change, departing from the usual or traditional in literature for youth. So basically, I'm talking about literature for children and young adults. And what she meant by usual or traditional are, for example, novels with one narrator, one point of view. You have to read it from left to right, top to bottom, front to back, something like that. According to her, there are three types of radical change books. Hold on. Okay. The first one is, my focus later will be the last one, but the first one is book with changing perspectives. From one perspective, a narrator, to multiple perspective, and then also previously unheard voices, for example, from different ethnic groups, just like Pak Jonathan Moore said, different countries maybe. And then also from the youth who speak for themselves. So a lot of children's books are written by adult with adult perspective. Some of the examples, books with multiple perspectives, is, for example, Julia Alvarez's book called You. This book is talking about you, one of the characters, but the other characters are talking about her. So we see her, what kind of person is you, from different perspectives, from her sister's perspective, her friends, her parents, her teacher, and so on and so forth. And then the second one, another example, is Bull Run. So Bull Run is a story about American Civil War, told from 16, if I'm not mistaken, 16 different characters, and from the north side and the south, right? So usually when we watch a movie, for example, about Civil War, then we tend to see it from the winning party perspective, but this book is not, right? And from regular people also. And then Voices from the Street. So this is a poem collection, I think, from children of the street. And then Out of My Mind is from the perspective of mentally challenged kids, right? So these are example of the first type. And then the second type is books with changing boundaries. For example, subjects previously forbidden for children and young adults, talking about sex, maybe talking about death, sadness, settings previously overlooked, from probably usually about children in middle class, and then to poor children, right, in a slum area, something like that. Characters portrayed in new complex ways, new types of communities, and stories with unresolved endings. If you notice, a lot of stories for children and young adults are associated with happy endings. It's not always true. Some example, for example, this book, After, by Amy Ifall, is talking about high school student who is pregnant, and she was not the kind of students who drink and going to the bar and stuff like that. She's a good student. And how come she got pregnant? If you are looking at the cover, this is very interesting, because in the mirror you see that she's pregnant, right? And the other side she's not. Another book is by Magdala Peña called Love, and this book is picture book that talks about not only happiness but also problems and sadness, which the author said he had to argue with the publisher to present those subjects in picture books. This is one page from his book. You see kids here, and then parents. It seems that they are arguing and the father was leaving. Is this a kind of book for children? But then again, how many children in the world experience this kind of thing, right? So new subject. And then the third one, and this is the one that I'm going to focus for, books with changing forms and formats. And we are talking again about handheld books or physical books that has forms and formats resembling the internet, which will be probably suitable for young readers now because they are so familiar with the digital world and the internet, and books were kind of left out. So this kind of books can become a bridge for those who wants to go back to handheld or physical books, right? Including in this is or are books with graphics in new forms and formats. I will have some example later. Words and pictures reaching new levels of synergy. So it's not only picture as illustration, repeating what has been there in the text, right? But there's a new level of synergy. Non-linear organization and format not necessarily has to be read from left to right, top to bottom. Non-sequential organization and format, multiple layers of meaning, and sometimes interactive format. Let me show you some of the examples. For example, this one I think is the oldest book of my example. Book written by Lauren Miracle. She wrote, I have two of her books, TTFL and TTYL, and I think the young readers or the students know what that means, those means, right? So these books is not written in a regular narrative like a novel, but written in the form of I don't know if you are familiar, internet messenger, which we used a long time ago. Now I think it's replaced by WhatsApp. And we also use Yahoo Messenger at that time, a long time ago. So we will be able to know the story just from exchanges of text here. So a lot will be missing, and sometimes as readers we will probably miss the context, right? So if you exchange text, you don't always give description about the context, and this is true with these three girls, right? Maddie, Snow Angel, and Zoe Girl. Screen name, right? Not real name. So when reading this kind of book, it might be closer to the teenagers or the young readers' life. This is what they face every day, but also giving the readers a different way to interpret book, not like a traditional or usual novel where almost everything is described in there. And then this is from a book called I, Dracula. So the content of the book are just like this. Exchange text messages, and then browser, Mina's browser, Jonathan Harker's browser. Okay, so no description really of what's going on. We will have to be able to interpret what's going on in the story just by looking at this kind of stuff. For example, from Mina's browser, when she was browsing a romantic destination, probably we can conclude kind of that she is a romantic, right? A romantic person. And when she browses a recipe, then we know what kind of food she likes and that she likes cooking. So that kind of thing, right? There is a gap that the readers will need to fulfill, to complete, instead of the narration in the book. This is taken from An Order of Emily, Hold the Fries. The whole book consists of images, of memos, of menus, of photos, notes that tells the story of the characters. But again, we don't have to read it from left to right. You can read the right part first, so different from traditional literature, and you will have to interpret it yourself, right? Because no narration really is found in this type of book. This is taken from Book Thief. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that book. The Book Thief is a regular novel, like a very thick novel, but very interesting to read. Probably about 400 pages. And inside that book, a girl, the main character, is making a handbook for her friend. And this is the handbook that she created. Right, so there is a novel, a short story or novel or a picture book inside the novel Book Thief. Right, so again, synergy between the whole text and this one, the small picture books that she wrote. This is taken from Chopsticks, the title of the book, about a missing piano player. And again, the book consists of different types of images. I think it opens with a paper from news from a newspaper about a missing piano player, right? And the story goes on from there. They're trying to find out what happened to her by, for example, looking at her childhood, right? And this is part of the childhood when she was born, when she was a child, and so on and so forth, right? And then from the same book, this is a picture book, and in front of the picture book you have already found a warning. Said this book appears to contain a number of stories that do not necessarily occur at the same time. Then again, it may contain only one story. In any event, careful inspection of both words and pictures is recommended. So the book is Black and White by David Macaulay, and the first page is like this. So each of the pages are separated, divided into 4 parts. The first page is probably the title, right? Seeing things, waiting game, utter chaos, problem parents. So is this one story, or are these 4 stories? If these are 4 stories, are they related to each other? If they are not, then why are they in one book, right? Something like that. And then the next page still divided into 4 different parts, but how do we read it, right? It's still kind of confusing for me, but probably for young people might be interesting how to interpret this kind of book. Right, so these are some example of the pages of the book. And then another example is Wonderstruck from Brian Selznick, which combine pictures and text to create a book, but the pictures are not illustration. The pictures are telling one story and the text is telling a different story, and then at the end they synchronize together, right? And 9 billion branches, you can Google it. This is an example of poem collection in a very interesting way. I don't know if I have time to show this. This is not a physical book, but I just want to show you how a book can be very unique and interesting. Okay, apakah share screen saya masih ke Mozilla?
Masih ya Wonderstruck itu tuh.
Di PPT atau di Mozilla sekarang?
Masih di PPT. But you still have 1 or 2 minutes, Ibu.
Okay, let me try to share this. Right, do you see it now? Yeah, very interesting book because there is my alarm, 20-minute alarm.
Oh, yeah.
So you can click here and goes to the first poem, you can click and then it will go a different poem. You can click on this and then it will bring you to other page, and you can click everywhere you want, every direction that you want. It does not have to be left to right, but this is just one example of probably a real digital book. But what I wanted to share with you especially was the handheld books that carries digital pages in there, so that this might be interesting for young readers and can become a bridge to read other books. Right? Thank you, Lily. I think that's all my presentation for today.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Teresia and Anggrani. That is a great presentation, quite interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to the fourth keynote speaker. We will have Ibu Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SPD MPD. Ibu Agnes, it's your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. Okay, I need to have a Pak Teguh. Pak Teguh, can you share my slide, please?
20 minutes, yeah, Bu Agnes.
Yes. Thanks, Lily, for introducing me here at the third students conference, and then allow me to welcome all the great presenters who have shared their experience, ideas, and thoughts in this event. Thanks to Mr. Jonathan Moore, Mr. Joseph Lemont, and Ibu Teresia Eni Anggreni for their presence at the third students conference here. Okay, while we are waiting for Pak Teguh to share my slide. And today, I will share my mini classroom research finding, which I conducted this semester. Yeah. It's about digital learning for future learners. Next, please, Pak Teguh. Yes, okay. Digital learning for future learners. Okay, and then the next part. Next part, I will talk about introductions, and then the current issues in education. Next is about current trends in teaching and learning process, and the last is the sum up. Okay, so next slide, Pak. Yes, I've got 2 classes for the subject business critical reading and thinking. Then I assign my students to do PBL, or it is known as problem-based learning, with the topic of digital learning for future learners. I have prepared my talk. Yeah, of course, yeah, you have seen that one. And then I will start with showing you the Industrial Revolution that I believe everyone here has already known, what is meant with introduction in the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution starts around the 18th century when the steam engine was firstly used. Therefore, it is called the 1.0 industrial era. In the 19th century, electrical energy was massively used in this 2.0 industrial era. Then, in the 20th century, automation was spread everywhere, and it was the beginning of the 3.0 industrial era. Now, we are in the 4.0 industrial era, where IoT, or the Internet of Things, and cloud computing starts to apply in our daily activities. Digital learning is one example of the IoT. Well, Digital learning, or people may call it online learning, is rapidly used during the pandemic of COVID-19. I chose the topic of digital learning for my reading class, for my business critical reading and thinking class, because I want my students to be more aware of the new era. Since it is called business critical reading and thinking, then I want to develop my students' critical thinking by assigning them to have group work to do problem-based learning. The next slide, please, Pak. Yeah, okay. Digital learning involves the use of a broad range of technology to enhance learning strategies that rely on digital tools to a small to large degree. Yeah. For example, blended learning, you can read it. Yeah, I put some information in the slide. Yeah, there are also some benefits. Why nowadays we use digital learning? Among other benefits is because it can save teachers time and enable them to track their students' progress. And we can do it in real time also. But there's a constraint that shows clearly providing students with access to devices does not lead to better outcomes. And then having thoughtful integration of technology, this is one way to overcome it, enables students to actively engage with ideas and their peers so that it can enhance the learning experience. There are some findings written by the experts supporting the use of online learning or digital learning. The next slide, please, Pak. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there are some research findings. Some research has been conducted by scholars, Tabor in 2011, the use constructivism allows learners to construct their own understanding of a topic by building relationship between ideas and facts. And then long ago, before that, called in 1978, constructivist theory and technology work well together because technology allows for flexibility and learning at their own pace. And then Race et al. In 2016, they found out a kind of psychological effect. For example, is boredom and feeling stressed. Of course, the use of technology in classroom setting will give an impact on education. The next slide, please, Pak. Yeah, okay. Some scholars have stated their opinions concerning the implications of technology for education. There is no single learning format that is suitable for everyone. Flexibility is essential to reach a broader audience. It is supported by the opinion wrote by Joan here. She found out that there are a broad variety of learning styles and levels of motivation. And then understanding the audience's preferences maximize engagement. When selecting media content, it is crucial to understand the audience preferences. So therefore, it is one way to overcome the boredom. And then media alone are not enough to engage learners. There are so many teaching apps. As teachers, we have to be accustomed to use kinds of teaching apps. Yeah, and digital materials should be complementary to classroom learning, and educators play a critical role in whether digital resources embraced or rejected by pupils. And then the last implication is technology on its own cannot fix poor teaching or low student engagement. Again, students engagement, teacher-student engagement is very important. And then next is next I will talk about PBL, which I assign my students to do as their group work. Yeah, what is PBL? What is problem-based learning? Yeah, it is a method based on real-life problems for acquiring and integrating new knowledge. It is one application of student-centered learning. And so what is the purpose of problem-based learning? Yeah, it aims at giving students a well-structured problem to work through and is conducted by student-centered learning. I've mentioned it before. The students will gain essential problem solving and critical thinking by doing problem-based learning. There is a cultural change, yeah, as one of PBL characteristics, which means that the students should be adopted and adapted to a new culture. For instance, they should know how to accept other opinions and take others' criticism. The students will gain some insights, such as it will help them to think beyond what they have known, encourage an attitude for long life learning, and improve social responsibility. So to help my students do their work accordingly, I prepared a template for them to do problem-based learning work. Next slide, please, Pat. Yeah, okay. There's the template for them to do, yeah, for the documentation, yeah. I want the students to think of the title, so it is called project title. The next is project aim or learning outcomes. The students make a list of things which they'll be able to do upon completion of the case, and then the problem definition. The problem statements relate with the real world scenario. The team structure. The team structure means who are involved in the project and what are their roles. And next is discussion questions. Questions to be dealt with and talks to be undertaken by the group in the course of pursuing solutions. And then resources here, it means the references, the web links, or anything else related with the case. And the last is the guidelines. It deals with information and solution development. The next please, Bob. There are 3 stages applied in PBL that my students have to comply with. First is the problem definition. The students need to first grasp the nature and scope of the problem. And then in this stage, the students have to formulate problems from the text they used as the object of the analysis. Those problems will be the discussion questions. Second, deal with relevant information. The students and their groups have to look for relevant references from different sources, offline and online modes, to support their analysis. All of them use online resources from journal, web links, and other kinds of references. And the third is define a solution. The group members must discuss to find out the best solutions for their problems. Then they must present their findings using an infographic. Each group members must share their parts when they have their presentation. Those 3 stages are part of 3 characteristics of problem-based learning analysis, and with fulfilling it, they have applied their critical thinking and develop their social responsibilities. The next slide, please, Pak. Okay. The development of social competencies comes into effect through participation in social practices meaningful to pupils, through the process of building the identity of a member of the community or learning or practice, and at the same time, through the process of building the community itself. So based on the students' problem-based learning, I divided their works into two, namely current issues in education and current trends in teaching a learning process. I analyzed their work based on those three stages of problem-based learning. I want to know the process of how they formulated their questions for discussions, of how they searched for relevant information, and presented their findings based on their problem-solving activity. Okay, there are 4 topics belongs to current issues in education, everybody, as you can see it on my screen. And then next part. Okay, so problems defined and then relevant information and develop a solution. The students must use those 3 stages. Next part. Next, please. Okay, current trends in teaching and learning, there are 7 students whose work belongs in this category. Next, please, Pak. Next slide, Pak. Okay, the first stage is define the problem. And then, next slide. Okay, deal with relevant information. Next slide. Okay, the last stage is develop a solution. Next, please, Pak Teguh. Yes, okay, this is the conclusion. The last of my presentation today is to show the SWOT or SWOT of my students' problem-based learning work. I concluded the work in SWOT because I found out that the work portrayed the SWOT of digital learning for future learners. The strengths are students are accustomed to using different kinds of teaching apps and LMS. Teachers can adjust their roles to have students' engagement, time flexibility, and teaching a learning process. While the weaknesses are the internet access, internet connections, the availability of technology in education tools, the lack of real student-teacher interaction. And the opportunity is the government regulation in applying technology in education. Parents' control for young learners is very important. And recent innovation in digital learning. And the last point is the threats. The threats are rapid changes in GIE tools and also psychological effects like anxiety, boredom, feeling stressed, and also teachers inadequate in applying GIE. Well, everybody, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening. I will give the screen back to the moderator. Have a good day. Thanks, Pak Lili.
Yeah, thank you, Agnes. A great presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we are in a question and answer session. We still have 60 minutes for this session. So you can raise your question by yourself, or I may read some of the question in the chat box. Yeah.
In the chat box.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to begin from the first, from Pak Sugeng Purwanto. Pak Sugeng Purwanto, will you raise your question yourself, or I have to read it? Okay.
Go ahead with yours.
Okay, thank you, Pak Sugeng. So the question is dedicated to the four keynote speakers. Yeah? There are two questions. The first one is, what do you think of the fact that students do not or readily store information or knowledge in their memories or brains? Most of them depend on Google search engine when they need information on anything. That is the first question. And then the second question, how would make the students realize that they also need to store information in their brains or memories? Thank you. Who would answer the question first? Please, it could be from Mr. Jonathan Moore or Mr. Joseph Namun or Ibu Teresia Eniangraini or Bu Agnes. Please.
I could go ahead and respond to that.
Yes.
I would argue that it's probably not an either or issue. You don't have to be able to just use Google or just have that information in your mind. The goal in the information technology world is to be able to problem solve. And so if you can problem solve that off your brain, that's great. But the goal is to be able to find the information that's going to be necessary to you. And yeah, you do need a base level in your brain already to operate quickly and easily. But the more important challenge is, can I find the answer that I need to? I do closed book tests in a lot of my classes, but I also want students to be able to look at the text itself or go to the internet and to find out what's there. So I don't think that it's a bad thing to be able to use Google. And I think at times we overemphasize the way that we learned as children or as college students if it was a rote memory system. And we don't have to necessarily have all that information at our disposal in our brain for us to still be good students, or for us to still be good learners. That's my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Pak Sugeng, does it answer you?
Yeah, I think
I
it's
hope
just,
so.
Yeah, it's quite okay. The concern is that people are lazy to learn new things. Okay, it's easily find in Google. Why bother learning? That's a problem. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Sugeng. Is there any other opinions coming from whoever keynote speaker? Please.
Can I add something?
Yes.
I think just like what Dr. Moore said, that depends maybe on the need of the students. Sometimes they just need to find information on the surface, but when they are doing research, hopefully they will realize that they will need to find deeper information that they can find in academic journal, periodicals, or books, or something like that, and use it for their research. I think it's just the way how our way of learning is changing because of the internet, maybe. Thank you, Pak Lily.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move to the next one. Sorry. This is the question is from Bu Agnes Widyaningrum. This is dedicated to Mr. Jonathan Moore. Did you find any significant difference between African and Indonesian indigenous cultures? Thank you.
I think the parallels are definitely there. It's tough to make the broad statements, as I mentioned in my talk about to make the assumption about all African literature or all Indonesian literature. But as a post-colonialist, as somebody who studies colonial literature as well as culture, one of the things you find in a lot of colonial, post-colonial environments is the desire to find identity. And so, I'm a white guy speaking to Indonesians right now, so I always have to be careful about how I phrase this, but you aren't Dutch, but you also aren't who your parents were before the Dutch came. And so your perspectives have changed. culture will change and develop. There's no way we can avoid that change. It's a matter of kind of channeling it in the right direction and making sure we don't lose things, as Pat Joseph said earlier. So a lot of times in colonial literature, we see that search for identity. So I'm not Indonesian like my grandparents were, but I'm certainly not Dutch. So what does that make me? You're eating at McDonald's for lunch, but at the same time, you take off your shoes before you come inside. You're practicing certain traditions from your faith from before, but you maybe are doing it through a Zoom call. And so how do you find that ultimate balance? I think that's the similarities to go to. But otherwise, it's tough to make some of these cultural comparisons, because the Indian literature you find is going to be very similar to the Javanese literature because of the caste and the levels. But that's not something that, for instance, traditional Kikuyu literature has. They don't have that same power distance division among people groups. So this is why you have to read world literatures, so you can make these parallels for yourself. But I think that's probably the search for identity is the big change, is the big similarity that you see between colonial literatures.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That's wonderful.
Pak
All right,
Lili,
thank you.
Pak Lili,
Yes.
can I add
Oh, yes, please. Yes,
Jonathan
please.
more? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Jonathan, can I call you Jonathan? Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
So can I say that later on somebody will lose their own identity because of this?
Just one more time, can you say that?
If I say somebody will lose their identity because of this, what do you think?
I don't think you can lose your identity. I think that we are not the same people that we were when we were the age of 3, that when we're 16 or 40. And that's a matter of growth and development. And that's how culture works. I think it was at Sanatha Dharma probably 10 years ago. I gave a presentation about the myth of losing culture. And a lot of times we will have, oftentimes it becomes in political or religious leaders warn us against the fact that we are losing our culture. No, you're changing your culture, and that culture changes regardless. I think there are some dangers in letting culture change without reflection and without having a critical eye to it. We grow and change anyway. And so, yeah, losing your identity, losing that heritage and the connection you had with your grandparents, sure, I can definitely see the difference. But I think that I wonder if Pat Joseph would have more to say about that subject than I would.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Joseph Lemon can add more of what has been presented by Mr. Jonathan Lemon.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
I agree with that. Culture needs to remain dynamic, and it needs to remain relevant to its contemporary context. A good example, what we discovered during the program was when COVID-19 hit Sumba, the government responses were all, the WHO recommendations were all issued in Bahasa Indonesia. Now, a lot of the population here in Sumba doesn't speak Indonesian. A lot of the older population only speak Canberran. So some of the people from our program, these are traditional musicians, quite old. They found this very current problem and they found a solution. So they wrote songs that addressed the WHO health recommendations. They offered solace to people, Sumbanese people stuck in Bali or in Java, unable to return home because of the travel restrictions. So what we saw then was a great example of how a traditional cultural genre can remain vital and can remain relevant and can remain a very important tool for policy and for development. I think the key thing is not, I mean, in a nation like Indonesia that's so culturally diverse, a blanket approach is not going to work everywhere. You need to have local solutions depending on what area you're dealing with. So, yeah, that would be my point. Another thing I might mention is that it's always the most at-risk cultures are always the minority, smallest cultures. And there's a difference, I think, between cultures changing and having your culture changed for you. So some people, that the process is very positive, they're moving it along. But in these smaller cultures, I think sometimes all these massive changes are occurring that are against the wishes of a lot of people in the community. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I agree that it does need to remain dynamic, but I also think that there's a lot of forces that are acting on culture that you know, in the same way that they're acting on our environment, basically. And I believe culture is very similar to biological our biological environment.
All right, I think is it related to the two videos that you plan to play?
Yes.
If so, then I think what if we enjoy one of the videos for for a while? I mean, for about 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe the video that the videos about the COVID-19 response would be probably appropriate to the last question. I've sent them to the committee. Can we play them there or? Ah, here we go. Oh, this is the other one.
Yeah,
This one's fine as well.
this one, right? Yeah.
Katang udu wala kuru umakinda ango katamarana ya wala pabahali makinda ango katamanganya ninandu malurinda ai katundun jarango ango taana mangganya nandu maluri kinda ango kana rehina pahanganda ai kahangu iya tinda ai lapawang gaya na penyakit corona angu
Well, that's great. Any comment or more explanation or information for the video?
The Marapu two community members composed those songs, and since the songs were released, they were commissioned by the Bupati in Sumba Timur to be performed at local puskesmas around Sumba Timur. They've been commissioned for government events. The army, the Brimob, also used the songs in a video of theirs that gave directives for health recommendations in the Canberran language. So the YouTube videos were shared quite extensively in Sumba, in Indonesia, and internationally as well. So I think the last time I checked in January, there are around 10,000 people that had seen them. So yeah, I mean, just with the way the internet works these days, all kids have hand phones. So there's this really great power to have these localized responses to global events and to reach people outside of these smaller cultures.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Now let's move to the next question. This is from Fitri Wulandani. This is dedicated to Mr. Joseph Lemon. Such an interesting presentation. I know that mentioning the culture is such a huge duty, especially in the modern era. I'd like to ask your opinion how we can maintain those, what is it? I don't know. The culture itself when we also have to follow the development.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think these are decisions that need to be made within the communities themselves. So I think the role of programs should be as facilitators for the wishes of what the community wants to do and what they want to keep. If what they don't want to keep, I mean, it's not, you know, nobody's. Yeah, it really has to come from the culture bearers themselves, basically. But I don't think they need to be, as Jonathan mentioned, I don't think modernization and culture needs to be mutually, maintaining culture needs to be mutually exclusive. I mean, it just, like Jonathan was saying before, it has to remain dynamic. It has to have cultural context. It has to respond to contemporary concerns. Yeah, so that would be my response to that. In terms of the maintaining, there's been a fair bit of research done by Dr. Catherine Grant about maintaining culture and how to measure vitality and that sort of thing. And the main factor that she identifies is intergenerational transmission. So whether that line of transmission being, you know, being broken or being maintained seems to be the key element. But she identifies 12 different factors that affect vitality. But yeah, maybe Jonathan has something you'd like to add about that.
Yeah. Will you add something?
Joseph and I were having kind of a side conversation, and I mentioned that Sechuachana has a professor here who's a world musicologist, I think. The terminology may be off on that, but he was studying Rotanese gong music from the island of Rote. And one of the points, and I was editing his dissertation on this time, so one of the points that he made was that incorporating some of these ideas through kind of a localization model of using, for instance, in his case, traditional music, but incorporating it into more modern styles of music. And so using the same instrumentation, but for whatever the students are listening to, whatever the kids are listening to, the youth, so that we have that intergenerational connection still. We don't lose that. That we still have, the parents may not appreciate the style of music, but they appreciate the language or the musical instrument choice. The kids may not appreciate the old, slower style of listening, but they appreciate the fact that now it's on TikTok, or they're incorporating different ways of going ahead and adding the dance style of the old to the new, maybe increasing the pacing of it, those kind of things. So yeah, that's one of the ways that we're seeing cultural changes happen in a positive light. It isn't just about doing away with the old culture, it's about making it more dynamic and innovative to fit the contemporary situations and the needs of the people. I really appreciated the video of, yeah, how do we go ahead and take that and have the traditional language serve the modern function of the.
Well, thank you. Wonderful information. Okay, now move to the next question. This would be for Ibu Eni from Bu Agnes Widyaningrum. Yeah. What did you think of Radical Change book? Did you find it beneficial for the author or writer? Yes, Ibu. Ibu Anggraini.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Agnes. I don't know if those types of books are beneficial for the author. Are you referring to materials like how many books are sold, something like that?
No, well, I think because of the rapid changes of technology, Bu Eni.
I think it is more beneficial to the readers rather than the author, right? Because those types of books are giving alternatives to readers more choices of the types of books that they want to read, they are willing to read. Of course, some of the books are award-winning books, if I'm not mistaken. A book by Brian Selznick, Hugo, is a Caldecott's winning, award-winning, and it has been filmed also, made into a movie, but more beneficial to the readers, I guess.
Okay, one more to, can I ask to any? Yeah, about
Yeah.
the book thief. Yeah, you said that there's a book inside, the story inside the book, yeah, the book thief.
Yes.
Yeah, I've also seen the movie. I think it's very interesting book. Yeah. So, in a way, talking about the format as you have explained, so what do you think of it? The format is in book thief.
The new format, you mean? Yeah, there are several, not several, I think one or two books that I have read that has the same pattern, right? So book inside a book. Another one that I read was, I think, bibliography, a picture book about Ernest Hemingway. And inside, really, there is like a small book intended to be handwritten, but of course it was printed as like a draft of Ernest Hemingway's book, right? So the format itself for me is kind of interesting because it's different, right? And if you see something different, you tend to be curious at least and want to read that book. But for the book thief itself, rather other than that part that carries the small book written or made by the main character, the rest are kind of just traditional, like a traditional novel. So text and left to right, no other pictures other than this.
Yeah, is that enough? Well,
Yes,
I think that's
thanks.
great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Now we can move to a different question. Well, this is from Ibu Endang Yuliani to Mr. Joseph Lemon. How do young people in Sumba appreciate and preserve their culture? Well, simple question, but I don't know the answer. It's really difficult. Please, Mr. Joseph Lemon.
It depends on which kid you're talking about. They all have different views on things. The one there's kind of a generation now that's looking more into their roots, and like the young singer that we saw in the video also, he's been quite instrumental in giving young kids the confidence to actually follow their follow their own desire to write music, or they mightn't do it in exactly the same way that their grandparents did, but I think he's giving them the confidence mainly to speak their own language. They're bombarded with music in Indonesian from outside. There's no real, I mean, on radio and on handphones, all media, it's like, it's very dominant culture from both from Java and also from the West as well. So, you know, when young kids get to see someone like Jackson on YouTube, or, you know, it sort of inspires a lot more. It shows kids that they can do that too. It gives them a role model to look up to. So yeah, I would say there's a lot of kids that couldn't care less about, and of course, I mean, You remember when we were teenagers, we didn't want to have anything to do with what our grandparents were. You know what I mean? Like, we wanted to rebel. That's just a normal instinct, I think. But at the same time, yeah, it's important not to forget your roots, where you come from. So that's a difficult question to answer. I hope that comes close to somewhere, yeah, close to answering.
Something like preserving the identity, yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Move to okay, from Didi Leona. Ibu Annie, would you like to share the last link about Austria? I think it has been, but in case, yeah. Okay, I want to. Would you like to share the last link about secret technology website to explain in your presentation? Okay, I think it has been put in the chat box, but maybe Ibu Annie would like to provide more information or comment on the links or the content of the links. Please, Ibu.
Thank you, Pak Lili. So I have shared the link if anybody wants to check it out, right? Look at the digital book. And I came across that digital book, I think not intentionally. So I was searching for digital books and came across that, and very interesting. If I'm not mistaken, this also won an award. I don't remember what, but the way how this is a really interactive collection of poetry is, for me, something new. So you can choose. Sometimes you got confused also because there was a picture. When you click on the picture, and then it shows the internal body of a man, and then when you click the heart, then there something pops up, and I don't really quite understand what that means. But the form itself is different from a regular poetry book collection, and it's very interesting just to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu, for the explanation. Now move to the next question. Well, again, this is to Ibu Teresia Eni Anggraini. This is from Rizda Octavia Putri. The question is, does radical change apply to all books for youth? Thank you.
No, so there are books for children and young adults which Eliza Dressing called as traditional book. So not all children's literature are radical change. Even it's not also related to era or time. She mentioned that some of the older books actually radical change too, right? So not only the new books, right? Some of the older books already have multiple perspective, for example, right? And can be called radical change, although she did not coin the term until 1999, right? So not all new books are radical change. Not all older books are traditional. We'll have to read it, look at it, and decide. And whether it is important to classify this book as traditional or other books as radical change. Is the category important, or whether all those books are interesting for people to read? Which one is more important? Is it the name, the classification, or the fact that we all try to make books once again something that are enjoyable, especially for young readers. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lisa, Octavia, Putri, do you still have anything else? Do you still have anything else to raise?
No, sir. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Okay,
thank you, sir.
Yeah. You're welcome. Now we still have other questions coming from Fitri Wulandari to Mr. Jonathan Moore. The question is, what are the huge differences between modern literary work and classical one? And do you think that globalization and assimilation also affect the way people think, and really possible to change the culture itself, especially in the literature field? Thank you. Yes.
We've got two university courses right there in those answers. We've got 16 weeks that we can talk about both of those questions there. The first one, it's tough to go ahead and make some of these generalizations, but certainly between the traditional literary and the classical ones, depending on how we're defining these terms, one of the things we're seeing certainly is about economy. That if you're talking about traditional stories, they're not going to be as concerned about page numbers. They're not going to be as concerned about selling books. They're not going to be as concerned about fitting into a certain mold that will get them a greater readership. And so, I mean, I think that that's an easy one to go ahead and look at. It's just the economics of writing and what that means. Looking at, do I divide this into 2 books because I can sell more books that way, or it'll be easier to film when I go ahead and sell out to Hollywood. A lot of those things. I think in more broader terms, we can talk about minority voices coming out in more modern literature, that we are more likely to go ahead and see fewer dead white men. And instead, we are able to go ahead and open up to alternative points in more modern literature. We're hearing from, there's a lot of different terminology we can be getting into, and I don't want to try to reteach all of these ideas that would take a course to get into. But certainly the marginalized have a voice in modern literature. That there's Charisse Kramer-Ray has this term called the muted group theory. And the argument is that not all people groups and not all voices are heard at the same volume. And modern literature allows for more of those perspectives. I appreciated the talk on radical change books, because radical change books, we're hearing from handicapped, we're hearing from queer writers, we're hearing from more women writers or more ethnic minority writers. And so we're seeing that in more modern literature. And it's able to get out there in part because of the digital age. Because people can self-publish, or people can have smaller readership, or people can reach people continents away and find a readership that's far away from where they are geographically. And so those are huge changes there. That's the quick and ugly answer to the first question that I have. The second one is, we are going to change. I encourage you to, if you're not familiar with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, it's a theory that I like to introduce my students to early on, and I kind of drum it into their heads. But the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is simply, we create reality with the words that we use. And so if we are listening in English, if we are reading in English, we are going to take and be influenced by an American or Western or English perspective more so than if we are listening in our own languages. I appreciated Ngugi wa Thiong'o's push for more localized language, even into the 1960s and 1970s. The idea that the Kikuyu people needed to have journals written in their own language, and they needed to have more fiction and more nonfiction written in their own languages to maintain this cultural identity and to allow it to not be eclipsed by the more broadly spoken languages of Kenya at the time. We are going to be influenced. Being aware of that influence is key. Globalization and assimilation definitely shape the culture and the direction that we're going. There's no avoiding that. maintaining a foot in that transcultural world that we live in, or many of you live in, making sure that you are reading in the local language, you are reading in multiple languages, so that you can get those multiple perspectives is valuable and important.
Yeah.
I think that I would love to hear from Annie or Joseph on that, or Bu Agnes if she has something to feed into that as well.
Just jump in there for a little bit.
Yes.
On the point you mentioned about small local languages. Now, the problem that I see, the main distinction is oral traditions versus written traditions. So, of course, written traditions, we can write down all these things. I mean, we can write our histories down, but the vulnerable thing about oral traditions, and these a lot of these smaller cultures and smaller languages, is once they're lost forever. And you know what I mean? Like, there's no way to record them, or there hasn't been until very recently. So yeah, these drives to actually write down knowledge in local languages, or to and you know, developments in linguistics and maintaining languages has a massive overlap with intangible culture, and obviously, yeah, well, with literature as well. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, the distinction between pure oral traditions and written traditions.
Yeah, wonderful. So yeah, we have to preserve the indigenous languages and also cultures. Okay, thank you. We still have another question in the chat box. This is from Yasinta Olia Nafisa. It is directed to Agnes. The question is, can PBL be applied to early semester students? And what purpose to stimulate their critical thinking skill? Thank you. Ibu Agnes, please.
Yes, thanks, Lily. Hi, Yasinta. Yes, of course. Yeah, this PBL can be applied for the first semester students. Yeah, and when you are asking about whether it can develop students' critical thinking or not, yes, it can. Have you seen that there are some stages, yeah, in PBL that we can adopt? And I believe also that, Yasinta, you have practiced, yeah, when I assign you and your group to do this work, right? Yeah, and I find out that if I apply this for the first semester students, yeah, it will give, I think they will develop better, yeah, than if I apply this to the last semester like you. So yes, Jacinta, thanks for asking. Yeah, that's all about it.
Okay, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we still have time for one or two more questions. If you still have to raise, please. One or two more questions. If not, then ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the committee, I would like to symbolically and virtually hand in the certificate of appreciation in honor of the presentation delivered by distinguished keynote speakers, Mr. Jonathan Moore, and then Mr. Joseph. What? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry to say, I've been informed that there is no, what? Oh, yeah. Well, the file has not been found. Sorry for this one, for a technical matter, but the certificate of appreciation and in honor of the presentation would be delivered via emails. Yeah, but again, on behalf of the committee, I would like to present my great gratitude to the experienced keynote speakers, Mr. Jonathan Moore. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the insights and knowledge about the literature. And thank you for Joseph Lamun for delivering the information related to indigenous cultures, especially in Sumba. And also would like to present my great gratitude to Ibu Teresia Enianggraini, MA, PhD, for the presentation related to the radical change in the literature. Well, that's great, I believe. And last but not least is let me present my great gratitude to Ibu Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum, SE, SPD, MPD. Thanks for the presentation. And once again, that the certificate of appreciation will be sent via email. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to send great clap, clap, clap to Mr. Jonathan Moore, Mr. Joseph Lemon, and Ibu Teresia Enianggraini, and Ibu Dr. Agnes Widyaningrum. Thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry if the time is not quite enough for delivering the presentation because we are limited by time. So once again, thank you, Mr. Jonathan Moore, Mr. Joseph Namum, Ibu Teresia Enianggraini, and Ibu Agnes Widyaningrum. I think this is the end of the plenary session. I hope that we learned something new again in a different occasion, in a different situation. We can gather again with these four distinguished and experienced keynote speakers. Thank you. I would like to send back to Keiko as the master of ceremony. Please, Keiko. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a wonderful speeches that we all have listened to. We will have a break for an hour, so you should back at 12:50 to the main room and wait for the host to assign you to a specific breakout rooms. In the breakout rooms, you all will be moderated by our license official. And don't forget to rename your Zoom display. Have a nice break and see you very soon.
Dulu ya.
Yeah. That will be.
You can enjoy your lunch now. Comedy.
Lunchtime.
Alhamdulillah.